Alright, in this video we're going to show you how to install a purpose-built Rockford Fosgate audio system. Hey everyone, I'm Eric and we're back here in the Rockford Fosgate R&D lab. Today we're going to install an X317-STAGE3 in this 2020 Maverick X3 Max X. Let's get started by installing some bungee cords on our doors so we can easily move in and out of the UTV. Now this next step isn't necessary, but we're going to use a T27 Torx to remove our roof so we have better light for our camera. Now we need access to the battery compartment, which is located behind the passenger seat. On our X3 Max X, it's located behind the rear passenger. Now, for stages 1 and 2, you only need to remove the rear passenger seat. However, for stages 3, 4, and 5, you'll want to remove all the seats. For video clarity, we're going to go ahead and remove all of them. To get started, we'll need a 3/4 inch socket with extension and remove 2 nuts from the rear of each seat. To access these nuts, you'll need to adjust the seat until you see them through the little access hole. Alright, now we're ready to finish detaching the seats. We'll use a 1/2 inch socket and wrench to remove 2 bolts from each seat front. Then we'll move to the back and use an 18mm socket and extension to remove the top of the seat belts. For our Max X with 4 seats, we'll use a T20 Torx to remove the seat belt bumpers to gain access to the top of the seat belt mechanism. Now on the driver's seat, there's also a seat belt safety lanyard that needs to be disconnected. Don't forget to reattach this during reassembly. Failure to do so puts the Can-Am in limp mode and significantly reduces your speed. Alright, now that we have access to the battery, we'll use a 10mm socket to disconnect the negative terminal. Okay, now we're ready to install our dash kit. Now the kit comes with 2 bezels. This bezel and backing plate are designed for the PMX-0. This bezel is designed for the PMX-2 and PMX-3 models. Also included is a speaker output harness. Now, to get started, we'll use a 1/8 inch bit to pre-drill 2 holes using the dimples in the dash as markers. Then, we'll come back to the table and secure our bezel to the PMX source unit using the small screws included in the kit and a 3mm Allen driver. Then, we'll secure the radio assembly to the dash kit using the same size screws. Okay, now we're ready to make our power connection to the source unit. The connector we need is attached to the underside of the center dash panel that's next to the steering wheel. For video clarity, we've removed this panel to illustrate our connections. We'll start by removing the upper dash fuse panel. Then, we'll run the female power connector from the source unit harness down the left side next to the 2 fluid reservoirs. Now, you'll need to get under the dash to make your final connection. Keep in mind, this may be secured by a dummy receptacle to keep the connector in place. Now, if you're using the PMX-0, you'll be using this yellow harness. Connect the female end to the power connector, then the male end to the source unit harness. Then just connect your yellow wire to the battery positive. Okay, now we're ready to prepare for our front speaker installation. To get started, we'll use a T25 Torx to remove 12 screws from the upper panels and 4 from the center console. 2 are on the top and 2 are on the center console itself. On the passenger side, there is a hidden 10mm nut located inside the fuel access door. We'll then use a plastic pry tool to remove 4 plastic push pins on the top and a 5th pin located behind the ignition, hidden under the panel. Now we'll move on to our driver's side panel. We'll lift up on the panel and disconnect our headlight switch along with any other accessories and detach the cable stays. We'll disconnect the harness to the smart lock module by pulling the red pin out, then depressing the black catch prong. This can be very tight, so listen for a click. Then carefully remove the plug along with the 2 additional Christmas tree stays. Now we'll transfer our smart lock module from the factory panel to our new speaker panel. First, orient both panels in the same direction on a table. Using an 8mm socket with extension, remove 4 screws from the smart lock bracket. While holding the smart lock with your fingertips, transfer the assembly to the new panel and secure it using 2 of the same screws. Then, using the provided hardware, we'll use an 8mm socket again and a number 1 Phillips to secure a 3rd landing. Then, we'll transfer any electrical switches to the new panel. Finally, we've included some replacement warning stickers. Now that we have our smart lock module and switches installed, we'll transfer our 4 pushpin grommets to our new panel so they're ready for installation. All right, now that we're done with that, we'll route our front speaker wires. Use the front left for the driver's side and the front right for the passenger side, making sure that our waterproof connectors reside at the center of the dash. All right, now we're ready to install our main wiring harness. The harness includes power, ground, amplifier input and output, and turn on, and will be routed between the driver's side dash and the rear battery location. To get started, we'll first remove side panels from both sides of the center tunnel. We'll route the power and ground cables into the tunnel from the driver's side. Then we'll cross over to the passenger side and continue running the cables back to the battery location. We'll finish by resting the RCA cables and speaker connections behind the steering wheel for connection to the amplifier later. All right, now that we're done with that, we're ready to rough in our subwoofer harness. Our newer down-firing subwoofer enclosure can be installed under the driver or passenger seat. On our Can-Am, we're mounting the sub under the driver's seat. We'll start from behind the steering wheel and route the large connector down to the center tunnel. Then, we'll exit in the same area as our seatbelt safety harness since there's a notch in the side panel for it. Finally, we'll coil up any excess cable for attachment behind the steering wheel. Now that we're done with that, we're ready to prepare our amplifier for installation. we're going to make your life a little easier by recommending to remove the outer and inner driver's side panels. Use a T27 Torx on 7 of the screws and also a 10mm wrench to remove 2 more that hold one of the panels in place. Now that we have that done, we're ready to mount our amplifier bracket. We'll start by positioning the bracket toward the outside of the driver's cage. Then, using an 8mm ratchet, secure 2 C-clamps onto the top. We'll keep these loose for now because we need to install a nut to the existing screw that holds the outer panel during the reassembly process. Before we install our amplifier, we need to tune it. Now, we provided this handy amp tuning guide to help you with this process. It's available in the description of our video and in our product details page on our website. Once we're done with that, we'll remove the connector since our harness already has it installed. Then, using a 2.5mm ball head Allen, use the 4 supplied screws to secure the amp to the amp bracket. Start on the outer screws first to help you position the amplifier. Then move toward the rear where it will be easier to locate the screw holes. Okay guys, now we're ready to wire the amplifier. Now, it's really difficult to see the connectors and where you're plugging them into. So refer to your amp tuning guide for end panel references. This will make it much easier for you to see all the connections that you're going to make. Start on the rear of the amp. Plug in the speaker harness labeled front into the front output. Then the harness labeled rear sub into the rear output jack. And finally attach the power connector. Once that's done, we'll move to the front of the amplifier and plug in the harness labeled front to the jack labeled front and the harness labeled rear sub into the jack labeled rear. Now that we're done with that, you're probably having a nice cold one right about now. But this next part is easy because we're simply wiring and mounting our subwoofer. Now, our new suspended mount enclosure provides more clearance underneath and it fits under the front driver or passenger seat thanks to these brake line channels on either side. Of course, it still allows full up and down travel of the seat itself. To get started, we'll remove the grill, flip the subwoofer over, and use this wire to configure our DVC subwoofer into a 4 ohm amp load. Plug one end into the red positive terminal and the other end into the other voice coil's black negative terminal. Then we'll connect the wires from the inside of the subwoofer enclosure to the remaining terminals. Remember, red to positive and black to negative. Next, we'll use the provided 4mm Allen bit to secure the subwoofer using the 4 provided screws. Take note to properly align the screws straight down to capture the built-in bosses inside the enclosure. Finally, we'll use a T40 Torx driver to mount the step brackets to the box itself. The Diamond R logo should be facing up when installing these. All right, now that we have that done, we're ready to install the subassembly. Now, position the sub down and rest the brackets over the rear seat studs. Then, using a T40 Torx, secure the bolts through the front seat brackets into the threaded inserts on the enclosure. Finally, remove the rubber insert and plug in the subwoofer harness until it clicks into place. Okay, now we're ready to make our speaker connections at the main wiring harness. We'll start by tying off our rear speaker connectors since we're not using any. Then we'll route our dash speaker harnesses to the driver's side. Plug the left speaker into the front left connector and plug the right speaker into the front right connector. We'll also run the blue wire from the source unit to the driver's side and connect it to the main harness's blue connector. This will properly turn on and off the amplifier. Once that's done, we'll run our RCA cables to the center dash for connection to the source unit later. Now we're ready to clean up our wiring and get ready for our dash panels. First, we'll zip tie all the harnesses behind the steering wheel and secure them to the subframe. Then we'll move on to our amplifier. Be certain the lower tab on our amp bracket is seated over the panel screw. Then we'll go ahead and reattach this panel back in place. Once that's done, we'll install a nut over the lower amp bracket using a 10mm socket and finish securing the C-clamps on top using an 8mm socket. Finally, we'll reposition our interior panel and secure that into place. Alright guys, now we're ready to install our speakers and our speaker panels. We'll first attach our headlight switch, then our smart lock cable. Be sure to push in the red pin to lock it into place. Once we have the panel positioned, we'll connect our speakers. Red goes to positive and black goes to negative. Now these are keyed, so you don't need to worry about polarity. Then we'll secure our speakers into the number 1 mounting holes using the supplied 3mm Allen bit and screws. Okay, now we're ready to install our dash kit. From the source unit, first we'll connect the white 12-pin Molex. Then we'll move to our signal cables by connecting the front line output to the front RCAs and the rear sub line output to the rear RCAs. Once that's done, we'll make any additional connections like the antenna, USB, auxiliary input, or additional remotes. Then, using a T25 Torx driver, we'll secure the dash kit to the Can-Am using the larger screws included in the kit. Alright, now that we have all that done, we're ready to make our battery connection, test the system, reassemble everything, and get this Can-Am back out on the trails. Alright, as you can see, that installation came together pretty easy. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact our technical support. They can be reached Monday through Friday at 1-800-669-9899 or through live chat at the bottom of our website at rockfordfosgate.com. Until next time, I'm Eric. We'll see you again soon.